Welcome to Brighten Your Corner Ministry. My name is Cindy Ann Lewis Walcott, and we are studying life lessons from the Holy Bible. You don't have to be religious, these lessons are for holistic living. Today, our lesson is going to take us with Abram in asking for an assurance. This lesson can be found in Genesis chapter 15, verse 8. But before we attend this lesson, I'd like to revisit the last lesson, which I called a lesson in diplomacy. I had a friend called me and said that the lesson wasn't necessarily a lesson in diplomacy, it was an indirect request that lacked tact. So I believe there are different levels of diplomacy. There are high levels and low levels. But there is some merit to my friend's perspective in that, leading up to this lesson we're in today, I believe Abraham started tactfully, but then he lost it. He got too emotionally involved and asking too many questions leading towards the same thing. He kept asking for today's lesson, which is a reassurance. It's almost like he wanted to jump ahead of God's plan, so he wasn't really allowing God to slowly reveal the program to him or the plan to him. He wanted to go ahead. And in some instances, I had another friend call me and said, it seemed like Abram did not trust God because he knew he had no kids. And despite God telling him, I'll make you into a great nation, he's saying something to the effect of, this is crazy talk because there are no kids and I'm old. So I believe Abraham started tactfully. Maybe the things on his mind maybe wasn't the highest level of tact or the highest level of diplomacy, but I think there was some diplomacy there because he could have asked directly. And to me, an indirect question is a form of diplomacy, maybe not as tactful as some people would want it to be, but I give merit to my friend's argument. Now, because we've seen now, leading up to verse 8, that Abraham's belaboring the point. He's emotionally involved despite what God tells him and tries to reassure him in various ways. He's still asking and asking and asking. And I'll read you the final question that he asks. So Genesis chapter 15, verse 8. And he said, that's Abram, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? He's asking, how am I going to know? You're saying it, but you haven't given me an assurance. You show me signs, but that's still not something tangible. I still can't hold this up and say, I am assured I have a nation. So to some effect, I agree with one of my friends that he seemed to not have confidence in God's promise or in God's plan for his life. And with my other friend, I agree that there is some merit to his argument in that Abraham lacked tact in his approach. So I would say there was some diplomacy there in the lesson past, but Abraham lost his skillfulness as he got too emotionally involved in driving the point home. So the end of this lesson, as we get to chapter 15 verse 8, Genesis chapter 15 verse 8, asking for assurance, in my opinion, is a good thing. You may have a different opinion. If I'm going to start a project, I'm going to lend some money, somebody promised me something that I would need, I would ask for some assurance. How do I know I'm going to get it? And when am I going to get it? And who's going to be giving it to me? Who will you give to me? And I want to know things about what's going to happen. So I'll be asking for some assurance. If we're going to borrow money from a bank, they're going to be asking for assurance. If we're going to borrow money from family, anything we're going to start doing, even if we're going to do it on blind faith, and I know as Christians a lot, we do things by faith. We still, in the back of our mind, has some form of assurance. As Christians, we know God's with us, so we've got it. If you're a non-Christian, you would take on a project or a program expecting some kind of outcome, a positive outcome. So you would do things to make sure you are assured of a certain kind of outcome. So asking for an assurance is not a bad thing, but Abraham has belabored the point to this, or the request, or the nudging to this point where God said to him in the next verse, which is another lesson. You want assurance? Okay, here it is, but. So the next lesson is going to be about something else. It's going to be God's response to Abraham, how God responded to his asking this final question. Because to that point, from verse Genesis chapter 15, verse 3 to verse 8, he's just going on and on and on and asking for signs and so on. And God keeps trying to reassure him, but he wants something else. And God said, now, after, in the next lesson that's coming up, we're going to see how God responded to him. I hope you found this edifying. Please go back and read, as my friends tell me they do, to engage me in conversation. Remember, if you have a different perspective, it's all right. We each see this from our own values. We judge it based on our own experience. We see lessons based on what's happening in our lives. If you find a little lesson, because this, I consider it a teaching channel, please drop a line, say what you think in the comments down below, and we can engage in a discussion. I am This whole channel is about teaching people. So if you have a broader perspective than mine, if I am too narrow in my perspective, some people do call me and I try to address it. Please let me know in the comments down below, or call me, and then I'll try to address it in the next lesson, because I do want people to learn, and learn as much as possible in the broadest way as possible. I hope this was helpful. Please remember to give me a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.